Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Today we're presenting on the Library Advisory Board open call. I'm Tamara Nelson. I'm a health sciences librarian at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center in Memphis, Tennessee.
I'm Ellen Gibson. I am the brand development manager for the JAMA Network, and I oversee our market research work, and the library board falls into that category.
And I'm Natasha Nicola. I'm the sales manager for the U.S. and Canada academic institutions. And today we're going to talk to you about the Library Advisory Board open call process that we did to fill seats. So before we get started, I just want to do a quick reminder of the conference code of conduct. Conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion can be difficult or awkward. And we just ask that you please keep in mind that this open call process was and is a learning experience for all of us. Our methodology wasn't perfect, and we intend to share with you today what worked and what did not. We look forward to a meaningful discussion at the end of this presentation and only have positive intentions. So to start, the background of the JAMA Network Library Advisory Board was created in 2017, so it's only about 5 years old, and it was created to seek feedback and insights from institutional customers through a representative group of hospital, academic, government, and health system libraries. In the first year, we had 9 librarians, and we have been learning and refining our collaboration with them ever since. In our meetings, we discussed important issues and trends in publishing, with the goal that the librarian's perspective is integrated into our new products and initiatives. We also send out surveys and occasional questions to the librarians throughout the year. We have 4 meetings a year. 3 of them are virtual and 1 is in person. From the JAMA Network's perspective, the goal of this board is to better understand how librarians work with clinicians and researchers so we can be sure we're supporting our customers and end users as best we can. And we also hope that our librarian board members learn from us as we describe our processes and share ideas as we seek innovative and new ways to produce and present research, clinical information, and editorial content of the highest quality. So the idea for this open call that we're talking about today, it grew out of an understanding that our process for recruiting board members wasn't equitable. For the first 2 to 3 years, we added our members by recommendation. We were small and still trying to figure out what exactly it was we needed from this customer board. So in those early years, the makeup of the board did skew white, female, and lean towards director level at academic institutions. As we expanded, it was clear that we needed to look at the diversity both of the individual backgrounds, institution types, and roles. We're constantly trying to improve this board and our processes as we grow. So while we were growing in size, and we did add new members with more diverse voices, such as hospitals and special libraries, our process for adding new members was still recommendation only. In 2019, we formed a DEI committee within the Library Advisory Board. And this committee was created to advance, to better align with the AMA's health equity goal to advance health, racial, gender, and social equity. So we began working together to evaluate the practices around this board and ensure that we're operating in the most equitable fashion. The committee had 4 library board members and 5 JAMA Network staff, and it was entirely voluntary. This working group had a lot of discussions about how to be equitable in adding new members to our board, and we knew we would have a lot of open seats in 2022. So at the recommendation of our librarian members of the DEI working group, we determined the best way to be equitable was to recruit new members through this open call so that anyone could apply. So we then created an application review committee and added 3 more librarians and 2 JAMA Network staff to this open call voluntary team. And the objective of the open call was to fill 6 open seats using a more equitable practice to bring diverse perspectives to our board. Time and time again, research and studies have shown that groups that are diverse in cultural backgrounds and experiences produce better results. And especially in the type of work we're doing here, seeking opinions on trends in publishing and the best practices for publishers to work with libraries. And as I mentioned before, in early years, the members were asked to join the board exclusively by recommendation. Like most boards, our teams used our networks to find the best candidates by word of mouth. And this did give us some really great candidates who provided great insights, we realized that this recommendations from only our peers was limiting the candidate pool to those who have strong existing professional networks. Using an open call method was a more equitable practice that would cast a wider net and provide an opportunity for candidates not within our existing professional network to apply. And so from this experience, we learned that in the future, we plan to use a mixture of recommendations and open calls. While we still may use a recommendation to fill a certain perspective that we need, for example, a clinical librarian that's embedded in a hospital, we will continue to use open calls to fill seats when there's 4 or more seats open or every 2 years. We're still trying to figure out exactly what we're going to do in the future, but we do recognize that it's going to be a mix of the two. And at this time, I'm going to hand it over to Ellen, who will tell you about the process we use.
So I'm going to get a little into determining how we determined our criteria, et cetera. But before we go further, I want to make a couple points about our process. First, as Natasha mentioned, our board is really new, having just started in 2017. And we've considered this an experiment that's evolving as we all work together. So with this open call, as far as we know, this is a new process to everyone that has not been done before by any publisher. No one on our committee has ever been a part of a DEI-focused open call or developed criteria or rubrics like we did. So all this to say, everything was new to all of us, and we're still all learning together, and I'm grateful to everyone throughout who participated in this, because the transparent was very the communication was really transparent throughout our process. You're going to see that we came upon some challenges, but we were able to pivot and learn from them. And we at the JAMA Network really appreciated our librarian members of this committee for taking the time to collaborate with us. They were instrumental to the process. And I think the whole thing ended up taking twice the amount of time that we thought it would. So we started this process. You know, one of the first problems was we had no idea who would apply. We knew we wanted to make sure this opportunity reached librarians from backgrounds that are underrepresented in the profession. We also knew we wanted to add members who had experience working with different institutional perspectives that we didn't currently have on our board. And some of those included nursing schools, pharmacy schools. So as we started, we knew we had 4 seats to fill, but 2 more members rolled off. So we were able to increase our open seats to 6. You know, because we were unsure of who would apply, we knew we were going to have to do some thinking about how to balance the board once we, with the perspectives of our current members, adding the new members to make sure we had a balanced set of perspectives. So the process evolved as we learned more, and we kept adjusting throughout. One example of this, through our discussions, we came up with the idea of inviting early career members. Typically on boards, it's established career people who come, but I think early career members could bring a completely different perspective. Board positions are usually only offered to director level people, and we wanted these fresh perspectives. So we agreed to create 2 seats that were early career members for 2-year terms. So with this then, we had to figure out what we meant by early career, and decided in the end that it wasn't about age, it was more about experience, length of time experience in librarianship. So on to creating the application. Our team created the application together, drawing from our known wish list of perspectives we hoped to get at the time that we started this process, and with our board charter in mind. The application was reviewed and approved by our HR DEI office and the Office of General Counsel before we posted it. In the application, we asked for all leadership positions or responsibilities. We asked for membership in library organizations and specialty societies and affiliations. Applicants had to fill out a statement of interest, and they also had to attach their CV. They were asked to share their perspectives on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and describe how they would impact DEI through their work. This was optional along with the demographic questions, but I think it's worth noting that every applicant who applied filled out the DEI statement even though they weren't required to do so. We learned that we likely should have put more emphasis on this statement and allowed for a higher word count because during the review process, the librarians on the committee pointed out we wanted to see more from the applicants on how they were actively involved in advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion in their work, not just that they support the concept. So we posted the application publicly. We promoted it here at the Charleston Conference. We shared it on listservs that were both general to librarianship and also in specific subgroups and committees. The sharing went well. We also posted it on Twitter, and our library board members also shared on their Twitter and through their networks. The sharing went well. In the future, I think if we were able to better identify the criteria we're looking for in new board members, we'll be able to market better to more specific groups, such as, for instance, hospitals, government agencies. And next up is Tamara.
So I'm going to talk about creating the rubric. So we discussed blinding the applications initially, but since the point was to create a more diverse board, we felt it was important to keep the demographic information. We did allow reviewers to recuse themselves from evaluating any specific candidates. This came in handy for me considering some of my colleagues at previous institutions had applied, so I didn't want to show bias. We drafted the initial rubric and made some changes after discussing it as a group. We did use the same rubric for established and early career candidates. However, since 2 seats were earmarked for early career candidates, we asked that during the review process, reviewers approach the early career candidates with a different mindset. For example, where you might give a 1 to an established candidate who had no board experience, an early career candidate would get a 3, considering they didn't have an opportunity to join a board. So now I'm gonna go over the rubric. We had 8 criteria, generally based on the applicant's work history and various affiliations. Our scoring was 0 to 3, 0 being did not meet any requirements, 3 being they exceeded the requirements. We then had a short answer section of the rubric for reviewers to score and provide a response to the applicant's notable accomplishments, their diversity statement impact, and elaborate on what new perspective the candidate would bring. So here's the breakdown. We reviewed 35 valid applications. So we eliminated non-subscribers, applicants from the same institutions as existing board members, as well as any late or incomplete applications. We then divided the applications among the reviewers. We were assigned 8 to 10 applications to review, but were able to view all the applicants' applications and CVs. We allowed 2 weeks for this initial review, and everything ended up taking way longer than we thought. It became a full-time job, and that wasn't our full-time job. It was important to everyone that we were giving each application our undivided attention and consideration, so that's why we took a little more time. So the results of our first review. So we learned that our rubric did not accurately evaluate the criteria that was most important to us. In fact, based on the scores we received, our first pass of top candidates were, surprisingly not, entirely white women with extensive experience at academic institutions. While these were still great candidates, they were not going to fulfill our initial objectives of bringing a diversity of perspectives to the board. The mid-career candidates and candidates of diverse backgrounds fell to the middle ranks. These candidates in the middle were actually top-tier candidates, but because we put emphasis on things like experience with other boards, affiliations, experience in the field, and only 3 categories for diversity and new institutional perspectives, these candidates were not able, to rise to the top in the way that we had hoped. After all, if the only way we can serve on a board is through recommendation, impotent like these may have prevented the very candidates we were seeking. It didn't give enough value to mid-career and diverse candidates from having the opportunity to serve on a board. We saw the bias in this criteria. At this point, we decided to pivot methods. So yes, time-consuming as it was, there was a second review. A spreadsheet of the results and comments from the first review was given to all reviewers along with all the applicants' CVs and applications. We were then asked to vote for 4 established career candidates and 2 early candidates. We were reminded that the goal of this open call was to seek diversity of thoughts, experiences, and backgrounds. We also asked that in this voting that everyone provide a brief statement for each candidate they recommended, giving the reason for their choice. This helped us all to understand why the reviewer was recommended by the candidate. With this more specific criterion in mind, we completed the second review. The results of the second round of reviews showed 2 clear early career candidates and 4 established career candidates as our new members. These candidates have exemplary work history, many accomplishments, and most importantly, they bring a new perspective to the board. So Ellen, I'll turn it over to you.
So we chose 6 new members and overall increased the diversity of our board in terms of underrepresented groups in librarianship, institution type, audiences served, and career stage and role. In the final analysis, we realized that the board would not be balanced in terms of institution type as we didn't add a hospital librarian. So we added a number of academic librarians, and we had 3 hospital librarians on the board, but now we were skewed heavily toward academic institutions. We brought this issue back to our leadership because as a medical publisher, it's important to us to make sure that we're bringing that clinical perspective in. And they generously allowed us to increase the number of seats on the board so we could add a hospital librarian. And the committee had universal agreement on the candidate that we added. So in total, we now have perspectives from medical, nursing, pharmacy school audiences, early and mid and established career levels, underrepresented groups in the profession, experience with data and AI and bibliometrics, experience working to advance DEI through internship programs, community outreach programs, and special committee work, producing scholarly work in librarianship on a variety of topics, and institutions that represent large top-tier academic institutions, state universities, hospital libraries, large research and small and mid-size and government libraries. So our key takeaways. I'll start with the challenges. I think one of the main challenges for us was developing objectives. Since we didn't know who would apply, we couldn't anticipate the challenges we were going to face with the many individuals applying who are in the same type of institution at the same point in their career, in the same roles, etc. So we had to strike the right balance of what each individual might bring to the collaboration based on all of these factors: their institution type, position, geographic location, lived experiences. In terms of what our overall group looked like, every single person was an excellent candidate. So it was very challenging.
Yes, and we didn't realize we introduced the very bias we were trying to eliminate by evaluating for board experience. We also didn't anticipate how much time this process would take. We estimated that most everyone reviewing applications spent at least 10 hours on their review. A labor of love, people. Our scoring system, as mentioned before, it was flawed. We should have included clear guidelines and descriptors for each statement so everyone was using the same measures for their scoring.
Yes, and I'll just reiterate again, time as the biggest challenge. It could have been someone's full-time job to do this whole project, and it was really important to all of us that we did this right. So we could have used like months more of time to make sure that we were doing it the best way we could do it. But in terms of positive, I think communication and the flexibility that we displayed was great. There was a lot of conversation between the librarians and the JAMA Network staff that were sometimes difficult or awkward, but needed to happen. And we learned from each other and we were able to pivot, like we were able to change our way of thinking and get to the best results. So yeah, I think that concludes what we have to say. Do you have any further discussion points or if we have any questions?
Yes.
As far as the board membership criteria, have you guys, after this and after it kind of being revealed as a challenging aspect, did you toss it entirely or did you just grade it differently? That piece of the criteria.
So the question was, after we identified that the board membership was a problem, did we toss it entirely or did we revise it? We tossed it entirely. I don't think it should have been something we were evaluating for in our scores.
You were first.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just wanted to know, out of the amount of applicants that you had at the open call, was that kind of what you all expected to have? And in the future, do you expect to have exceedingly more?
We placed bets on how many we would get, and it was a spread. We were thinking anywhere between 20 to 70. So I think 35 was, I think it was really 40, but then we eliminated 5 for whatever reasons. So I think it was a fair representation of what we were expecting. I think now that we've done this process, I think we know better how to market in the future. If we know, if we do a gap analysis of what perspectives that we're missing on the board, we'll be better able to target those audiences next open call.
Yeah, so I would agree, and I think as a librarian representative, the more that we library board members talk about our experience on the board, that's going to increase the applicants in the future.
How often, or how long is each board member's term, and how often do you need to have a similar experience in the future?
So the question is, how long is each board member's term and how often will we have to do this process in the future? Standard board members, not early career, are 6-year terms and early career are 2-year terms. Now, we'll have a number of people rolling off in 2024 who are some of our original members. So at that point, we probably will be considering another open call. I think to do a process like this, you have to have plenty of seats available to work with. But people also resign for various reasons. Life, gets in the way, they have other commitments. So I think very few people actually make it to 6 years. So when people are rolling off, at that point, we'll consider if we want to wait and fill that seat at the open call time, or if we have a particular perspective we've identified that we're missing. We also, I know there's a regional aspect to our board that we like to have a couple librarians from Chicago, and we're gonna have some rolling off soon, so that might be something that we might wanna do by appointment. But I think we've agreed we don't wanna do an open call more than every 2 years, just because of the time that it takes for everyone. And the question will then be, do we wanna save those seats, or is it urgent for us to get a perspective in?
Right. Yes.
Obviously, such a huge part of ensuring that you're able to get diversity on a board is making sure that you're getting diverse applicants in the first place. Do you have any kind of thoughts or suggestions on how to put the call out there to make sure that you get the diversity in those applicants that you're after?
Okay, so the question is that how do we ensure diversity in our applicants?
Yeah.
How do we get that diversity? So I feel like as a librarian member, that what we did was targeted the affinity groups within our professional organizations. So for the Medical Library Association, there is the Latinx Caucus, the African American Librarian Alliance, and then the Asian Diaspora Group. So targeting those areas and also the LGBTQ Caucus, so and the Accessibility Caucus. So we were very intentional about making sure we sent out the call to all these diverse groups.
Thank you.
You had mentioned that moving forward, you would consider allowing each candidate to write a longer essay, and there's a word limitation which made it more difficult for you to do your evaluation. I was just curious, what was the word count that you had limited it to, and what do you think is the right number?
Okay, so the question is, what was the word count limit for the diversity statement and why do we feel like it needed to be extended? I think it was 300 characters, 300 words, not characters, thank you. It was 300 words, and we could tell from reading those statements that they wanted to give more. And so, because the purpose was to focus on DEI, it should have been longer for them to really expand upon what they're doing in their communities and their DEI initiatives. Any more questions?
Jay, I have one more. Sorry. So the applicants, is what they're getting out of this resume material? Or is there any sort of other, I don't know, what are the perks of being a librarian on this board?
Okay, so the question is, what are the perks of being a member of the Library Advisory Board? So as a librarian on this board, I guess I'll take this question. So when I joined the board, it wasn't to check a box on my CV. It was because it was an opportunity to engage with JAMA, the JAMA. And so that alone was, what excited me about it. It was also a chance for me, being a Black woman, to add diversity to the board, which I was excited about, and just to hear from the publisher end what we can do to serve our patrons better. So I can't speak for all board members on their intentions for applying, but I know that was for me. And to further expound on that, I've enjoyed being on the board. I came on in the midst of COVID, unfortunately, so I'm in my second year on the board, and so we've met virtually. And it's been very engaging to connect with not only JAMA, but my colleagues from institutions across the country that I may not have been able to connect with before, and to share information about how we're using our resources, and even down to when COVID was at its height, having a discussion on how are we all preparing to come back after the shutdown, and even someone shared how to get a glass screen for my information desk, which I use. So it's about the networking, the connections, and so that's the rewarding part. Any more questions?
Good job.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks so much.